Okay, we are going to look at cell division and the cell cycle. To start with, the question I posed to you guys earlier is, why do cells divide? There are 8 characteristics of life. One of those 8 is that something that is living has to grow. Now, growing doesn't just mean get bigger, but it also means that living things will mature and develop over time. Whether this is just something like a bacteria cell growing and building itself up to the point where it then divides, or whether it's something like us, where we grow and develop and become more complex as we age from embryo to fetus to baby all the way up to a full-size organism. So, along with all that, there is still that growing in size. One of the main reasons that cells divide is that as growth occurs, there are certain limits that are reached. Mainly, cells need to be able to do a couple of things. So, if in terms of size, cells need to be small enough to, first of all, operate efficiently. As with anything in life, as with any type of machine or mechanism, the more efficiently that something can operate, the better it will be at what it does. So for cells, the larger the cell is, the less efficiently it can operate. Kind of think of it in terms of a city. All cities started off as a town. And more people moved there, causing them to grow and grow and grow. If they didn't make any changes to the city as more people moved there, the infrastructure wouldn't be able to handle it. So, in terms of moving nutrients in, waste out, etc., cells need to be able to operate efficiently, which means they need to be small enough to do so. Second is cells do create parts of their own resources, in particular proteins. The larger the cell is, the more strain is put on the DNA. So cells need to be small enough to where the DNA can also operate effectively. If the cells get too big, there's too much pressure put on the DNA. Next, in order for us to develop in terms of complexity, organisms need to be able to grow and change. And one of the things that we had talked about last trimester when we talked about the human body was we talked about this idea of differentiation. We don't have the same cells all throughout our body. My skin cells are different from my blood cells, are different from my brain cells, for instance. But we all start off as a single-celled organism. We all start off as that single-celled egg. So we go from that single cell and we get bigger and bigger and grow and grow and grow. And as we grow, we also develop in terms of complexity, with these general cells differentiating into more specialized ones. So the actual process of cell division. As we stated earlier, the third part of the cell theory is that cells don't just pop into existence. Cells need to come from other existing cells, and they do this through the process of cell division. In particular, the process that we refer to as mitosis, which I'll talk about in the next presentation. So with cell division, this is the process of a single mother cell, which is what we call the original or the currently existing cell. So the mother cell will then divide into 2 new daughter cells. So the mother cell is the first cell, the initial one. It goes through all the process of growing and preparing. that it divides into 2 new daughter cells. And once again, cell division occurs for several reasons. Number 1, to produce new offspring. There are several ways, and the term for this is asexual. Asexual organisms and asexual reproduction means that it doesn't need a partner to reproduce. And there are several different ways of this. It's just, it allows it to just divide and new organisms. As I talked about previously, cell division needs to occur to moderate cell size. We don't want the cells to get too big, otherwise they won't be able to perform the tasks that they need to perform. Next is to replace old or damaged cells. As cells get older, they are no longer able to perform efficiently. So cell division occurs, breaking down old material and reusing it in the new cells. And it also replaces dead and damaged cells. Anything that is damaged from some sort of injury or some sort of other type of occurrence is repaired. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier as well, this allows for the differentiation in multicellular organisms. So anything that is made up of more than one cell, this differentiation occurs to allow for them to become more complex than our single-celled counterparts. And we're going to go into a process that is called the cell cycle. The cell cycle is simply a repeating process of the cell. After it divides, the cell will grow, and it will produce the materials it needs to produce. Then it will replicate its DNA before it divides. Then it will grow some more, and then it will ultimately split into 2. And we break this down into 2 parts. The first part is called interphase, which occurs in between divisions, we'll say. The second part, and this is going to be what we focus on later, is called mitosis and cytokinesis. This is the actual process of dividing. Like I said, our main focus for now will be on interphase. The cell cycle, as I said, it has 2 major phases. Interphase, which is the in-between period that of growth and DNA replication that occurs before and after a cell divides. So in between divisions, this is what is occurring. It is called interphase. During this time, normal cell functions occur. So the things that we think about cells doing, stuff like producing energy from the mitochondria, producing proteins using the DNA and some of the other organelles, or in terms of plants, producing sugar from its chloroplasts, all of these normal cell functions occur during interphase. And there are 3 phases for interphase. And so just to be clear about this, interphase is the majority of that circle that is on the right side of your screen. G1, S, and G2, that is all interphase in terms of this kind of pie chart breakdown of time. Alright, so the first phase is what is called G1, or growth 1. Sometimes it's called gap, sometimes it's called growth, but either way it's referring to the same thing. During this phase, most of the cell growth will occur here. So creating organelles and just growing in size, because yes, cells do still grow in size. They grow during this phase. Once they reach the end of this phase, they start what is called the S phase, or synthesis. Synthesis duplicates the chromosomes. Now, I'm sure everybody's heard of this term before, chromosomes. all a chromosome is, chromosomes are specific bundles of DNA that carry our genetic information. So we already know that DNA is our genetic code, it's our genetic blueprint. Well, if you imagine a blueprint being this multi-page document, the chromosomes are kind of the individual pages. They're different parts of the building plan. Alright, so it duplicates, it creates a copy of your DNA to prepare for cell division. Because we need the same DNA in every single cell, right? So we will create an extra copy for the new cells. After that synthesis is done, is the G2 phase, where the cell finishes growing, and if you look on your right, it expands on this a little bit more. There's also a double checking process that occurs to make sure that the chromosomes are correct. But for now, we'll just focus on the growth aspect. We'll go more into the DNA and chromosomes later. The second of the two major phases is the mitosis, or M phase. And this is the process of the nucleus and the cell itself dividing into the two new daughter cells. So, before we move on, I want you to tell me, what are the main things that occur during interphase? Okay. So last piece of information is rates of cell division. And more so, and I guess a little bit more accurately, is just that you need to know not every cell divides at the same rate. There are some cells, like skin cells, the lining of your intestines, like mainly various linings, they don't have a very long lifespan of only days to weeks, and then they divide. They are consistently replacing themselves very, very rapidly. In fact, with skin, it's generally only a couple days. Then there are other things, such as muscle cells, or bone cells, or a few other more permanent cell types, that their lifespan is measured in terms of years. So, like muscle cells are measured in terms of years. But lastly, there are some special cells in our body, such as neurons and special types of white blood cells. They never divide. Or if they do, it's very, very rare. They enter what is called G0, meaning that the cell still carries out all the functions it needs to do. So with nerve cells, neurons, they still do everything a cell does. It's just they will never divide, ever. So, before we wrap this up, I want to pose a question to you guys. Why do you think that it would be beneficial for cells to never divide? Why is it beneficial for something like a neuron, a brain cell? Why would we not want it to divide? How is that beneficial for us? And we will discuss this more in class. Until then, I'll see you later.